The light in the opulent dining room of the fine restaurant seemed to have no reason to be warm. On a long table draped in pristine white linen, a birthday cake with dozens of shimmering candles sat perfectly, a lavish ritual that felt obligatory. But the table was otherwise empty. No singing, no well wishes, no embraces, just a young woman sitting there, her small frame looking even more lost in the large chair. Her eyes were fixed on the candle flames, as if searching for an answer the world had deliberately hidden from her. This was Amelia Lancaster, the only daughter of one of the city's most powerful CEOs. At only 21, she already carried wounds both physical and emotional. A car accident 4 years ago had taken her ability to walk, imprisoning her in a wheelchair that felt like a gilded cage. Everything around her, from the custom-designed dress to the sparkling silver watch on her wrist, screamed of luxury. But amid the splendor, she couldn't find a single person who truly wanted to be by her side. Waitstaff in black and white uniforms glided past, their eyes quickly averted, pausing only to adjust the fresh flowers or refill her water before retreating. No one dared to linger, as if her presence were an inconvenience to be dealt with as swiftly as possible. A young waiter accidentally made eye contact with Amelia, quickly looked down, placed a tray on the table, and turned away, leaving an invisible scratch on her heart. The feeling of being treated as if she didn't exist. The phone beside her buzzed softly, the screen lighting up with a short message. "Happy birthday. Don't wait up. Dad." Just 6 words, as cold as a business memo. Amelia's hand trembled slightly, but she set the phone down, her face impassive, as if she had long practiced this response. In that moment, injustice was no longer an abstract concept. It was present in every breath she took. The daughter of the most powerful family in the city couldn't even get a real hug on her birthday. Have you ever seen someone sitting silently like that, in a crowd or a brightly lit room, their eyes seeming to say, "I'm here, but does anyone truly see me?" If you have, you'll understand why millions of people leave comments under stories like this, because somewhere in each of us there is a similar wound of being left behind. Amelia didn't cry. Her eyes were dry, but her shoulders trembled slightly whenever laughter erupted from a nearby table. The empty chairs around her seemed to mock her. "You don't deserve to have anyone by your side." A waiter approached and bowed. "Miss Lancaster, your father said, if you need anything, just let us know." His voice was soulless, distant, like a pre-programmed recording. Amelia just gave a small nod, not bothering to reply. In the brightly lit room, she was the only shadow, and in that shadow, a large question swirled in the minds of anyone watching. How could a girl like this be left all alone on her birthday? If you have ever had a moment when the whole world seemed to turn its back on you, please share it in the comments. Maybe your story will help someone out there realize they are not the only one who has had to endure it. And sometimes, it's these small, shared words that become a lifeline for a desperate soul. Amelia leaned forward and blew out the candles before they could melt away. There was no applause, no one shouting, "Happy birthday." Just the sound of a waiter's lighter as he lit a new candle for a table in the far corner, where a small family was chattering happily. She looked over, a flicker of envy in her eyes that was quickly extinguished, replaced by her usual emptiness. In that moment, Amelia realized a heartbreaking truth. Her presence at her own birthday party was no different from a decorative object, luxurious, but lifeless. And if these words have touched a memory of your own, please consider subscribing to this channel. Not to chase numbers, but so you will always have a small corner where stories of loneliness, love, and injustice can be told, instead of being hidden like a shameful secret. Just as Amelia was trying to swallow that feeling of invisibility, the restaurant door suddenly swung open, bringing with it a strange gust of wind. The sound of cheap shoes and a child's clear laughter broke the heavy silence. All the attention that had been turned away from Amelia was, in an instant, drawn to the 2 new figures who had just walked in. That birthday cake wasn't the first one Amelia had sat in front of alone. In fact, It had become a painful, recurring ritual. Every year, on her birthday, a cake would be placed on the table perfect in every detail, but completely empty of meaning. Only the number of candles changed. She would still blow them out, not to make a wish, but to clear the suffocating air in the room. And behind each one was a silent message. Your birthday is taken care of. That's enough. Amelia remembered it vividly. 4 years ago, the fateful day that had stolen her legs. A car accident, caused by a drunk driver. The sound of crunching metal, shattering glass, and then a dark, endless void. When she woke up in the hospital, she saw her father sitting there, not with the worried eyes of a father, but with the cold, calculating expression of a CEO. He stood by her bed, his voice low and curt. The doctors said, "You won't be able to walk again, but I'll hire the best specialists. You'll have everything you need." That should have been the moment he held her hand, promised her everything would be okay, that she would never have to face this alone. But all she got were disjointed sentences, as if he were in a board meeting, discussing a failed deal that needed damage control. Amelia had once been called the Princess of Lancaster. When she was a child, a sneeze would bring 10 nurses running. Every birthday party was a lavish event reported in the newspapers, with friends flocking to get close to the powerful CEO's daughter. But after the accident, the way people looked at her changed. It was no longer admiration, but a mixture of pity and discomfort. The invitations dwindled, old friends disappeared, leaving only an empty silence in the vast mansion. The cruelest part wasn't the wheelchair or the stairs that had become walls. The cruelest part was the feeling of no longer being counted as part of the world. At the long family dinner table, her father would only talk to his secretary or to business partners on the phone. She would sit there like a ghost, with no one asking, "How are you feeling today?" At school, when she returned after the accident, her friends no longer invited her out. They even avoided her, not knowing how to act around her. It was a kind of invisibility that hurt more than mockery, and it was this that etched a deep sense of injustice in the hearts of the audience. A girl who was once the center of attention, once valued, was now turned into a silent, decorative object in a golden mansion by her own father and by society. Amelia didn't lash out because she knew no one would listen. She just learned to be silent, to hold it all in her eyes. When you looked into them, you could see a bottomless abyss, a place of longing to be reached, but also full of caution from too many disappointments. Does that sound familiar? When someone who is supposed to love you treats you like a responsibility, a burden. That's the feeling that makes so many people choke up when they hear stories like Amelia's. And if you have ever had a moment of being left on the sidelines, please leave a line to share below. Maybe your words will be a light for someone else sitting in the dark, just like Amelia right now. As the years went by, Amelia realized more and more. She hadn't just lost her legs. She had lost her place in her own family. Her father was so busy that his presence was measured by the number of times his phone screen lit up, not by his gaze. Every happy birthday text from him was as cold as a financial report. Every promise of, "I'll take care of everything," only made her feel more neutralized. If you take care of everything, then what's the point of me? The dark room tonight with the candle, the cake, and Amelia all alone wasn't just a random scene. It was a perfect replica of her life for the past 4 years. Full of material wealth, empty of human connection, and the audience, even knowing only a part of it, had already begun to ask, what could possibly change this tragedy? Just as that question hung in the air, the wind from the open door seemed to be the answer no one could have predicted. A small figure rushed in, followed by a woman in a faded gray uniform, her hands still smelling of bleach. They didn't know they were about to completely change the fate of the girl in the wheelchair, but with just a simple sentence, everything was about to begin. The gust of wind from the open door made the candle on the cake flicker, almost going out. All eyes in the restaurant turned to the entrance, Except for Amelia, she sat motionless, without hope, too used to people passing through her life without leaving a trace. But this time was different. A clear, innocent laugh rang out, a sharp cut through the heavy atmosphere. A little black girl, about 6 or 7, in a worn but clean pink dress, was holding a small paper box tied with a blue ribbon. Her face was bright, her eyes curious as she looked around the room. Behind her was a woman with dark skin, in a faded gray janitor's uniform, a broom still in her hand. Her curly hair was tied back, her forehead damp with sweat from cleaning the long hallway. This was Clara Johnson, a single mother who worked day and night to raise her daughter. Clara stopped at the threshold, realizing this room wasn't for her. A few of the waiters looked annoyed, some pursed their lips and shook their heads, as if wanting them to leave. Clara was used to that kind of discrimination, but her daughter was different. She didn't notice. She had seen Amelia, sitting all alone in front of the cake, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "Mommy." The little girl tugged at her mother's hand, her voice a determined whisper. "Why is she sitting all alone? She looks sad. Can we sit with her?" Clara froze for a moment. A mother's heart ached as she followed her daughter's gaze. She saw a young, beautiful girl, trapped in a wheelchair, with a lavish cake in front of her but not a single person to celebrate with. The injustice of society was already so clear in Clara's own life, but seeing a rich child so abandoned, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow. "Sweetheart, she may not want strangers at her table," Clara said softly, trying to pull her daughter away. But the little girl shook her head firmly. "No, Mommy. She needs someone. I can feel it. Please just ask her." Children have a strange instinct for recognizing loneliness, an instinct that adults, in their busyness and fear, have forgotten. Clara took a deep breath. She knew she would have to face the contemptuous glares of the people around them, but she also knew that if she turned away, she would be betraying herself and her daughter. Clara walked slowly toward the table. Her footsteps were clear, a steady beat in the tense room. Amelia looked up, her eyes wide with surprise to see a stranger approaching not a paid employee, but a woman in a faded janitor's uniform. "Excuse me." Clara paused, her voice gentle, trying not to startle Amelia. She gave a small bow. "My daughter and I, we were wondering, would it be all right if we joined you?" The air seemed to stop. The waiters exchanged glances, and a few quiet whispers started. "My God, what does she think she's doing? Sitting with Miss Lancaster?" But Amelia didn't hear them. Her entire world was now focused on the tired but kind-eyed woman, and the little girl with a bright, expectant gaze. Amelia blinked, her lips trembling slightly. She couldn't remember the last time someone had asked to sit with her. Most people were there because it was their job, because they were paid to be, but no one had ever asked with such sincerity. The little girl took a step forward and opened the paper box in her hands. Inside was a tiny cupcake with a star-shaped candle. Her voice was a cheerful chirp. "This is for you. We made it this morning. It's my mommy's birthday today, too, but she's in heaven. Daddy says she can still see us, so maybe your wish can reach her too." Amelia felt a lump in her throat, her hands trembling as she took the small box. For the first time in years, her chest ached, not from loneliness, but from a sudden, unexpected warmth. The room was still silent, watching the scene unfold. Perhaps in many people's minds, it was just a strange, out-of-place moment. But for Amelia, it was like the first small crack in the thick wall of ice that had surrounded her heart. Amelia pressed her lips together and then slowly nodded. Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't used it in a long time. "Yes, please, sit with me." The little girl let out a happy squeal and pulled up a chair right beside her, her eyes shining as if she had just found a treasure. Clara let out a breath of relief and sat down across from them, her calloused hand resting gently on her daughter's shoulder, as much to reassure herself as her child. No one in that room knew that this simple moment would change everything. A rich, abandoned girl, a poor black janitor, and her daughter, 3 lives that were never supposed to intersect, were now sitting together at the same table. And from here, the real story was about to begin. The small candle on the cupcake flickered, its flame dancing in the gentle breeze from the air conditioner. It was tiny compared to the multi-tiered birthday cake covered in pristine white frosting and elaborate sugar flowers in front of Amelia. But strangely, it was that small flame that lit up her face for the first time that evening. Clara saw the tremble in Amelia's hands as she accepted the small box. The woman who cleaned the trash from hallways others wouldn't walk down felt her heart clench. She knew that the moment a wealthy person accepts a clumsy gift from someone with nothing, it highlights a stark disparity. But Amelia took it as if it were a treasure. Lily, Clara's daughter, was oblivious to the scrutinizing glances around them. She was already skipping around the table, softly singing a clumsy but enthusiastic rendition of Happy Birthday. Her childish voice filled the large room, breaking the silence that had long enveloped the space. Amelia let out a small smile, a tiny, fleeting thing, like a butterfly that lands and then flies away. But for Clara, for Lily, it was a victory. They didn't need much. They just needed this young woman to show a real smile. Just once. Clara spoke gently. "That's a beautiful cake, but no one should have to celebrate alone." Amelia looked up. In her deep brown eyes, Clara saw a nameless pain. Like an iceberg, only a small part was visible, while the rest was buried so deep it was suffocating. "I'm used to it," Amelia whispered, her voice trembling, though she tried to hide it. Lily didn't let the mood get too heavy. She pulled her chair closer to Amelia, her eyes sparkling. "Do you want to make a wish? You have to. When you blow out the candle, you must make a wish." Amelia was a little flustered. What was the last thing she had wished for? Maybe 4 years ago, before the accident, when she had wished to get into her dream university. Since the accident, making a wish had felt like a childish luxury. But looking into Lily's eyes, she couldn't refuse. Amelia leaned forward, closed her eyes, and blew gently. The candle went out. Her wish was so simple it was heartbreaking. "I just don't want to be alone anymore." Lily clapped her hands in delight. "See? Now it will come true." Even Clara let out a soft laugh. Her laugh wasn't like the loud laughter of the crowd outside. It was gentle, genuine, and it made Amelia feel not watched, not pitied, but simply accepted as a person. The waiter in the distance watched the scene with a confused expression. They were used to the indifference, to the image of the cold Miss Lancaster sitting alone. Now, Amelia looked completely different, brighter, more alive. A few other customers glanced over and smiled, but no one dared to interrupt. Clara poured some water into Amelia's glass, not with the timid gesture of a servant, but with the natural ease of a friend. "My name is Clara. This is my daughter, Lily. We come here every year, on this day. It's my late husband's birthday, too. We bake a cupcake, sing a song. It helps us feel like he's still here." Amelia froze. Her own pain suddenly felt small next to the loss of the woman in front of her. And strangely, it was that shared pain that opened a door. "I'm Amelia," she said quietly. "It's my birthday today. But my father, he's not here. He never is." Clara was silent. No more explanation was needed. She understood everything. Absence was crueler than poverty. She reached out and gently touched the back of Amelia's hand, the calloused hand of a laborer on the soft skin of a wealthy heiress. It should have been an impossible contrast, but in that moment, it felt completely natural. The heavy atmosphere lifted. They talked, at first slowly, hesitantly, then more comfortably. Lily chattered about her school, about a picture she had drawn for her mother, about the times they had to take turns eating to save money. Amelia listened, feeling both a pang of sadness and a sense of wonder at the strange strength in these seemingly small stories. In every glance, every word, Amelia gradually recognized something she hadn't received from anyone in years. A genuine presence. Not for money, not for fame, but because they truly wanted to be there with her. And in that very moment, as a gentle light spread across the small table, as a wealthy heiress and a poor mother and daughter sat together, none of them knew that they had just planted the seed of something that would change everything. The clatter of silverware from a distant table suddenly stopped as a tall figure strode into the room. No introduction was needed. His mere presence was enough to make the air freeze. It was Richard Lancaster, Amelia's father, the celebrated CEO of a tech conglomerate, a man the financial world both admired and feared. His expensive gray suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, his polished shoes reflecting the light from the chandelier. He didn't walk quickly, but every stride carried an authority that made the waitstaff move out of his way. Richard didn't need to look at anyone, didn't need to greet anyone. His cold, sharp eyes settled on the table where Amelia was sitting, and next to her, a janitor and her young daughter. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, as if he had just spotted a stain on a perfect painting. He didn't approach with the concern of a father, but with the stride of a manager who has just found an employee out of line. Amelia. His voice was a deep, firm rumble. Not loud, but enough to silence the room. What is this? Amelia gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. She was used to that tone, a tone used to give orders, not to ask questions. But this time, the fear didn't come immediately. Beside her, Clara sat up a little straighter, while Lily took Amelia's hand, her innocent eyes looking directly at the powerful man. "Dad, this is Clara and Lily. They joined me." Amelia stammered, but her voice wasn't as shaky as usual. "I wasn't alone anymore." "Oh," Richard's lips curled, but it wasn't a smile. It was poorly concealed contempt. He turned to Clara, his cold eyes sweeping over her from head to toe, the faded uniform, the worn-out shoes, the calloused hands. "Is this what it has come to?" Richard said, each word landing like a stone. "My daughter, having dinner with the restaurant's cleaning staff." A few whispers started. Clara's face flushed, but she didn't get up. Lily remained seated, her eyes wide. Amelia felt the injustice laid bare, aimed not just at Clara, but at herself. She was used to hearing her father use that tone in meetings when he was tearing down a competitor. But to hear it directed at the people who had just shown her such warmth, she couldn't bear it. "Dad." Amelia lifted her head, her eyes flashing for the first time in years. "She treated me like a person. Something you haven't done in years." The whole room froze. A Lancaster heiress, talking back to the CEO Lancaster. It was unheard of. Richard frowned, his face turning red. "Amelia, you don't understand. These people, they don't belong here. They're here because they see an opportunity. And you," he pointed a finger directly at her, "you are too naive to see it." Clara took a deep breath. She should have bowed her head, apologized, and retreated like someone from the bottom of society. But then her daughter's hand tightened on her sleeve, and Lily's eyes looked up at her, full of trust. Clara knew she couldn't stay silent. "Sir," Clara said, her voice not loud, not trembling. "We didn't come here for money. We came because your daughter looked lonely. She needed someone, and if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who doesn't understand." The murmurs grew louder. A janitor speaking directly to CEO Lancaster. An unthinkable confrontation. Richard narrowed his eyes, but before he could roar, Lily shot up from her chair. "Don't be mean." The child's voice rang out, clear and firm. "You're her daddy, right? But you're making her cry. My daddy's gone, but Mommy says real daddies stay. They don't just pay." The air seemed to tear apart. Richard stood frozen, his lips pressed into a thin line. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, as if the words of a 6-year-old had just pierced through his thick, cold armor. Amelia turned to look at Lily, her eyes welling with tears. Never in her life had anyone stood up for her like this. And in that moment, she knew this wasn't just about confronting her father. This was about reclaiming her right to live as a human being. Richard swallowed hard and didn't answer immediately. He took a step back, for the first time in years, losing his absolute control. In front of him was no longer a crippled, dependent daughter, but a woman finding her own voice, empowered by two people society had always looked down on. And that was when everything changed. A long silence pressed down on the room, as if the walls themselves were waiting for an answer. Richard Lancaster, the man accustomed to commanding thousands, whose every word could shake the market, now stood silent before a child. He didn't shout, didn't storm out. He stood there, his hands clenched, his breathing heavy, his face flushed with an internal struggle. In the eyes of many, Richard was the epitome of cold success, a CEO who never let emotions interfere with his decisions. But in truth, because he was so used to controlling everything, he had forgotten how to face his own powerlessness. When his wife died, he had run away by burying himself in work. When his daughter had her accident, he had tried to turn it into a medical problem, to be managed, rather than a pain to be shared. He thought that by paying enough money, everything could be fixed. But now, in front of him, all the dollars in his bank account held no weight. Amelia looked directly at her father, her gaze firmer than ever. Her voice wasn't loud, but each word was a knife cut into Richard's armor. "Dad, when I woke up in that hospital, I didn't need the best doctors. I didn't need a mansion redesigned for wheelchairs. I needed you. I needed my father. But you were never there. You disappeared behind board meetings and contracts because it was easier than looking at me." Her voice caught, but she didn't falter. "I'm not your project. I'm your daughter." Each word was as heavy as lead, and for the first time, Richard couldn't find a single excuse. He looked around, hoping for an ally among his staff, among the other patrons, but they all looked down, avoiding his eyes. No one would take his side. Clara sat still, not intervening. She knew this was no longer a conversation between a janitor and a CEO, but between a daughter and her father. But Lily, with the brave innocence of a child, added another blow to the silence. "She smiles different when she's with us. Real smiles, not pretend ones. Why can't you see that?" Richard took a long, shuddering breath. His eyes, which had always been so cold, were now red, the light in them wavering. He stepped back, found a chair, and sank into it, like a man who had been fighting for too long and was finally exhausted. His voice was hoarse, broken. I didn't know what to do. When your mother died, I could build a company in her memory. I could keep busy. But when you were hurt, all my money couldn't fix it. I felt useless. And I ran." "Oh." Amelia shook her head, tears streaming down her face, but her lips were pressed into a firm line, no longer afraid. "You didn't run, Dad. You abandoned me. And that's worse." No defense was left. Richard buried his face in his hands, the same hands that had signed million-dollar contracts, now trembling. He looked up and met Clara's gaze. In her eyes, he saw something he had been denying for years, the courage of a true parent to stay, even without money, even when they can't fix everything. Clara spoke softly. "She doesn't need perfection. She doesn't need a savior. She just needs her father to be present." Those words were like the final blow that brought the wall down. Richard lowered his head, his shoulders heavy. He was no longer the powerful CEO Lancaster, but just an old, frightened man who had wasted too many years. He whispered, his voice choked. "I've lost 4 years. How do I come back from that?" Amelia gently pushed her wheelchair closer and placed her thin hand on his. She replied, simply and clearly, One day at a time, Dad. Just start by being here, with me. The room was completely silent. And then, Lily, in the way that children always know when to break the tension, asked a question that made the world stop. Does this mean we can all be a family now? Because I really want Miss Amelia to be my mommy. A laugh broke out from the very people who had been in tears. Even Amelia laughed through her sobs, and Richard looked at the little girl with an expression of newfound hope. In the laughter, in the tears, something began to grow fragile, but more real than any contract Richard had ever signed. A year later, the familiar room of the small bakery where it all began was brightly decorated. It was no longer an empty, cold space, but was now filled with fresh flowers, white ribbons, and the gentle music of a small band. Today was not just Amelia Lancaster's 22nd birthday. It was also her wedding day. She sat in her wheelchair, but her pristine white wedding dress was custom-made, its long, flowing skirt cascading over the wheels, hiding them under layers of soft lace. Her brown hair was in an elegant updo, held in place by an old clip of her mother's, the only memento she had left. Amelia's eyes sparkled, not with tears of loneliness, but with a joy she had finally found. Beside her, Richard Lancaster was no longer the cold CEO. Over the past year, he had been learning to be a father again from scratch. He had joined his daughter for physical therapy sessions, and had let Clara and Lily pull him into simple evenings with humble meals. He had learned to sit in Daniel's wood shop, if we develop this in parallel, to hold a saw and a chisel, to understand the value of working hands, something he had never known. Today, he was the one proudly pushing his daughter's wheelchair down the aisle, his eyes red but filled with pride. Lily ran around Amelia in a sunflower yellow dress, both a flower girl and the bridge connecting them all. The child who had once wished, "I want Miss Amelia to be my mommy," was seeing her wish come true. She tossed flowers along the aisle, laughing and shouting, "She's the most beautiful bride ever," making everyone smile. Clara stood in the front row, her hands clasped. The woman who had once hesitantly approached Amelia's lonely table now stood tall, a witness to the miracle that simple courage can bring. Her eyes welled with tears as she saw the happiness on Amelia's face, a light that she knew no money could buy. When Amelia reached the floral altar, the bakery owner who had witnessed everything from the beginning officiated the ceremony. His voice was warm. "We are gathered here not only to celebrate a wedding, but to honor a wish made on a lonely birthday candle. A wish that has now come true." Amelia looked around. Smiling faces, old friends who had slowly returned as she grew more confident, Clara's co-workers, even some of the bakery's regular customers, all forming a circle of love around her. And in the center of that circle were Lily, Clara, and Richard. In her vows, Amelia's voice was firm. "I once thought my life ended in that accident. But then, I was given a family not by birth, not by money, but by choice. Daniel, Lily, Clara, and Dad. Today, I vow not just to be a wife, but to never again let go of the people who saw me when the world turned away." A burst of applause. Richard couldn't hold back his tears. He hugged his daughter after the ceremony and whispered, "I almost lost you twice. I won't make that mistake again." The wedding reception, which was also a birthday party, took place right there in the small bakery. Not a lavish ballroom, no powerful guest list, just the sound of a banjo, a guitar, and a simple, heartfelt song. People danced, and Amelia spun in her wheelchair with Lily, her lace veil flying. Her smile was as bright as a lamp, chasing away all the shadows that had once surrounded her. As night fell, Amelia and Richard stepped outside for some fresh air. He handed her a small piece of paper, not a contract, not a check, but a handwritten card with shaky letters. "Happy birthday, my daughter. Thank you for teaching me how to live again." Amelia pressed the card to her chest and whispered, "This time, Dad, you didn't miss it." From a cold birthday table, with just a girl and a lonely candle, a family had bloomed. Not a perfect family, not an endlessly wealthy one, but a real family. Because, as Lily had once said with her innocent wisdom, the best kind of family is the one we choose. Amelia looked up at the sky, where the stars sparkled as if they had witnessed her wish from a year ago. That candle had long since gone out, but its light had ignited a new life, and now, she knew for sure, she would never have to celebrate her birthday alone again.